Hey there, good morning from Tokyo. Today we're going to be talking about Zelda Ocarina of Time, which I'm extremely excited about. Yeah, I don't really like Zelda at all. The origin of this is actually that a friend of mine got me this book. So it's called Zelda Best Collection. It has sheet music for all the music from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and I think a couple of the earlier games. And it's been really fun to go into, especially because it actually has the keys of the songs and all of the chords. So I didn't have to do any transcription or anything like that. And there's a lot less room for debate about, hey, shouldn't this be in the relative minor key? What's the best way of thinking about this? So that's been really cool. Yeah, so I would say that the music from this game is probably my first musical influence ever, honestly. It's been very influential in how I write, so figuring it out has been really fun. In diving into this book and a couple of pieces from the game that I transcribed myself, I basically found that the music is really harmonically adventurous. And in order to fully understand it, what I'm going to do is bring you from a basic level of music theory, literally level one being five resolves to one, pretty much up to where I am now. So we're going to break this up into, I think, at least two parts. This first part is going to be starting from the basics. So without further ado, get your master swords out because we're going to do this thing. Level 1, 5 resolves to 1. In Western music, we like to base the chords off of the degrees of the major scale, and when we're analyzing them, we'll often use Roman numerals to denote their function in the scale, with capital letters to represent major chords and lowercase letters to represent minor chords. The 1 chord is often felt as being at home, whereas the 2, 4, and 6 chord have this feeling of I just walked out the door, and they set things up for movement in the progression. The 5 and 7 chords each have this feeling of being around the corner from home and having a sense of wanting to return there. And this is especially important for the 5 chord and its feeling of wanting to resolve to 1. This is arguably the most fundamental and important thing to describe Western harmony. The way we see this 5 to 1 resolution used is usually at the end of a section that's sort of a period that completes a musical statement. It makes clear the key of the song as well as often the length of the section, so how many bars was this section. If we want to set up for this satisfying resolution from 5 to 1, the simplest chord progression that we can write is 1 5 5 1. And this is precisely what is done in the shooting gallery theme in Ocarina of Time. Level 2, set up for 5 with a predominant chord. So if we want to make things a little more interesting and kind of take a longer journey from home, before we arrive at 5, which is also called the dominant chord, we can use one of these predominant chords, the 2, the 4, or the 6. The result of doing this is this 3-chord cadence that gives us more satisfaction when we arrive at the 1. Simple examples of this from Ocarina of Time include the town theme, where we hear 4, 5, 1. And in the B section of the Lost Woods theme, we find 2-5-1 cadences. So in each case, we set up the progression by starting on a predominant chord. Then we head to the dominant, the 5 chord. And now that we're around the corner from home, we return home. We return to the 1 chord. So 2-5-1 is particularly interesting because just like the 5 chord is a fifth above the 1 chord, the 2 minor chord is a fifth above the 5 chord. So in C major, what I mean is that just like G major is 1/5 above C major, D minor, at least the root note, is 1/5 above G. So because of that, we get these 2 resolutions of going down a fifth. Following my analogy from earlier, 2 feels right around the corner from 5, and then 5 feels right around the corner from 1. So that makes the whole cadence very satisfying. Level 3, longer chains of fifths. So as we can see, movement by fifths is really important in Western music, so much so that we have this tool called the circle of fifths, where each chord's a fifth from the next one. G is a fifth of C, D is the fifth of G, A is the fifth of D, and E is the fifth of A. So it turns out that all while staying in the same key, we can actually keep extrapolating this concept and make longer and longer chains of fifths. And in fact, in that previous example from the Lost Woods theme, there's a 6 chord whose relationship to the following chord, the 2, is also a fifth. We first had 5-1, the next longest chain is 2-5-1, and the next longest is 6-2-5-1. So we hear some of these longer chains of fifths in a couple songs in Ocarina of Time. One important one is in Kakariko Village's theme, which has a 6-2-5-1 cadence in it. And the theme for the Great Fairies Fountain actually uses an even longer chain. There's a 3-6-2-5-1 in it. A fun aside here is that all while staying on the white notes, all while staying in C major, if we want to make the longest chain possible of resolving down by a fifth, we can go B, E, A, D, G, C. This would be a 7-3-6-2-5-1. I didn't find any examples of a 7-3-6-2-5-1 in Ocarina of Time, but you could play around with that yourself. Level 4, key modulation. A next thing that will be useful for us is this idea of temporarily changing to another key. Kondo does this a lot in the music for Ocarina of Time, and most commonly modulates up by a fourth. The game's strongest example of this is the B section for Zelda's theme. Going back to the circle of fifths, we can see why it's easy to modulate up by a fourth, which is a leftward movement on the circle. As we go leftward, we add flats, and as we go rightward, we add sharps. So because of that, F major really isn't that far, quote unquote, of a key from C major. It just has a B flat, whereas C major is all white notes, right? That's why it's been our reference key for all of this teaching. Looking at the score for Zelda's theme, we see exactly this happen in the B section. It starts on an F major 7, which doesn't belong to the parent key of the song. It doesn't belong to G major. Rather, it belongs to C major, which again is a fourth above G. In adding a flat, we see all the F sharps of the melody become F naturals here. Since it's more of a temporary modulation than a long-form key change, there's no change in key signature. Level 4.5, the 4 of 4. So a brief, more advanced aside here. I've found a few examples in which we modulate up by a fourth, and then for the new key, we start on the 4 chord. So back in reference to our home key, this is the 4 of the 4. In particular, I've talked about the legend of Ashitaka from Princess Mononoke and the B section from my song called Mint Chip as each using either flat 7 major chord, yeah, that's what I called it, or a flat 2 of 6, like a Neapolitan chord that would lead to 6. Instead, I think a cleaner way to understand these sections is that we modulate up by a fourth, and for the new reference key, we start on the 4 chord and then we go to the 3 chord, which is a very common shorthand for 4, 5, 3, 6, as I've talked about previously. And indeed, my best evidence for this is that the Hisaishi song continues in that key. It continues a fourth up from where it was before. This 4 of 4 chord can be a really mysterious and interesting way to end a song in particular. This is like we're ending the song nowhere near home. We're like Korra going into the spirit realm at the end of this song and floating away from existence. Hear me out here. So basically, Ionian is the mode associated with the 1 chord, and that's sort of 1 degree of majorness. Then Lydian, the mode that's associated with the 4 chord, to me feels even more major. It starts to get brighter and even more, sort of slightly more mysterious. And then 4 of 4 is yet another notch. It's another fourth up. And because of that, it's even more major and more mysterious. This seems to have some consistency with Collier's ideas surrounding perfect cadences being brighter and plagal cadences being darker. But I'll leave it to Mr. Genius Man. He probably understands this better than I do. So I think I'm going to leave it there for part 1. You can stay tuned in future videos just regarding Zelda Ocarina of Time. I'm covering topics like secondary dominance, modal mixture, non-functional harmony. It's going to get a little bit crazier in the next video. Thanks for diving in with me into the music of Ocarina of Time. as I said, this game is super important to me, and I look forward to continuing to share about it. Some housekeeping items, I guess. I have started a Discord if you want to come hang out with me. There's a few of us on there. We talk about music theory. We can share drafts of songs that we're making. Talk about anime, like talk about me living in Japan, all that kind of stuff. There's that. Also, sorry for the relative infrequency of my videos recently, particularly these more in-depth theory videos. It's hard to do this part-time. So as part of that, I've also set up a coffee account, it's called. So if you like what I do, you can buy me coffee. It's just a way to tip. It's a much chiller way of doing the Patreon thing. So feel free to support me a little bit. And if I have more support, I might be able to get an assistant or some help that lets me make these videos at a better frequency. I'm going to try to get back on this kind of once per month release schedule. I'm also thinking about making a website where I can blog about more niche topics and things like that. So if you're curious about any of that, then sort of just stay tuned on this channel as I follow up with more information. But until next time, じゃあね。